I'm Russ Kickle, and welcome to another episode of American Reef. Today, we're going to talk solar, specifically designing a system. So over the past 12 to 15 months, I've been lucky enough to be able to do some experiments figuring out how to supplement the energy usage on our reef tanks with solar. And these videos are basically going to be the fruits of my labor, or maybe the lessons learned is a better way of saying it. With that said, let me kind of go over how these videos are going to lay out. Number one, it's a very broad topic. So what that means is there are going to be many videos in this segment. And what I want to try to do is get in depth enough as we get into it, but do it in stages. Right? So what you're going to see, first of all, is the first few videos here will be very fundamental stages, meaning the basics of things that you need to do right before you even pull a trigger, for example, and decide to buy a solar system. So with that being said, there's going to be a few that are fundamental, including today's show, right? And then from there, we'll kind of do a rinse and repeat thing, meaning what I want to do is basically put the videos in categories, right? The categories, one will be design, another one will be analysis, another one would be decision, right? So basically, from there, I'm going to try to categorize each one of the videos in one of those three kind of groupings, right? With today's, for example, being the design. Now, with that being said, I look at, I'll say, the viewers, and I put them in two piles, right? One pile is, or I should say group, not a pile. So one group wants to know the answers now, right? And I'm going to try to address some of those things in this video, right, for those kind of individuals. And then there's other individuals who are more on the, hey, I'm just researching. I'd like to know more about it kind of thing. And they don't necessarily want to pull the trigger now, right? And that's really who these videos are geared for, but there's a lot of commonality between all of them. And I would say that for both of those groups, think of solar on a reef tank as a journey, right? Because if you try to big bang it right off the get-go, chances are you're going to waste a lot of time and money and not achieve the end desire or goal that you wanted anyway, right? With that said, let's talk to the first group of individuals, right? The individuals who, again, they're looking more to pull a trigger now. So with those individuals, what I recommend is, number one, you get something called a solar generator. What is a solar generator, right? A solar generator is basically a unit that has batteries in it with inverters, etc., that will take either energy from the grid or from solar, and it will store it in your batteries. And you basically use those solar generators, right, to act as a backup whenever you need them. Which brings us into kind of the scenario. What I suggest for those individuals who want to jump on it now is you get yourself a solar generator and figure out basically what you want to do with it as far as backing up your system, right? That way you can kind of get into it without investing huge dollars, but at the same time, again, allowing you to make the progress that you want to make, while at the same time, again, I'll say not blowing or wasting money, right? Like a lot of us do when we're just starting new in basically, I'll say, a hobby slash, whatever technology that we're adding to that reef tank. Now, again, same group of individuals. The other thing you're going to ask yourself is, okay, with this solar generator, which one do I go with? Right? Well, again, to me, you've heard me say many times before, only time proves companies to be trustworthy, honest, reliable, whatever the adjective you want for them, right? So to me, you want to pick a solar generator from a company that has a good reputation, that's been around the block a while, especially in the solar industry. Because the solar industry, depending, what political party was in power to, again, whatever whims of states, etc., you'll see this kind of taking place as far as companies, a lot of companies in, then they'll drop out, then new companies will come in, and it's really a roller coaster out there. With that being said, there are 3 companies that at least I have a little bit of experience with that I think will be around for a while. Number 1, Jackery. Number 2, Ecoflow. Number 3, Anker. Right? All 3 of those companies have a good bit of mileage underneath them, and chances are they're going to be around for a while. Right? Now, again, for the individual that wants to jump into it, now we get into some topics that are going to cross both groups, right? Because now that you know what you want to buy and the company that you want to buy it from, you're going to ask yourself, well, there's all kind of models. Which model do I get? And that's where the similarities kind of lie. First thing you need to do, right? And again, I call these principles because there's probably like 4 key principles at least that I think we should rely on first before diving too deep, right? And the very first principle is, what are you trying to achieve? What is your use case? What is your end goal, right? It's like getting in a car and driving. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know when you get there, kind of thing. But ultimately, that's what we need to decide. Now, again, keep in mind that depending on your use case, that changes a lot of parameters. Most of the parameters will be time and money, right? And let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, you have an individual, right? And that individual lives in a state where it's sunny. Say California, Texas, Florida, Arizona, one of those kind of places, right? Well, again, that individual, as far as their end goal, right, what they're trying to achieve, they have all of the sun in the world to achieve what they're going after, because there's not a whole lot of clouds. Maybe 30 to 50 cloudy days a year kind of thing, versus maybe somebody lives in Pennsylvania like I do, where you're lucky if you get 50, 60 sunny days a year, right? And if you only have 50 or 60 sunny days a year, that means I need a lot more to produce the same amount of energy as somebody who, again, is living in a state where there's a lot of sun, right? Purely because it's the amount of sun that can be used to generate the energy. Again, when you got, again, sun coming at you all the time versus maybe sun coming at you once a week, you can only harvest what you've got, right? So again, that changes a lot of the design, your end goal, right? Give you another example. A system that is designed so that when the power goes out, everything runs, right? Circulation to filtration to lighting to heating to cooling, right? That design, right, is going to have a way different cost profile than somebody who says, okay, I want to design for an outage that lasts 24 hours and I only want to make sure that I have circulation and possibly heating, right? Again, both designs are valid, but one has a lot more cost associated with it than another. So the first principle, design. Figure out what you are trying to achieve. The second principle is keep in mind, and again, this is for both individual groups, that everybody's scenario is different. And when I say different, I mean there's a tendency in the reef hobby to take pieces of what other reef hobbyists are doing to try to create your own recipe. And though you can do that in the solar reef keeping space, everybody's environment is different. And so there are things that you may not know or see which will null and void the design that maybe somebody else is using. Again, let me give you another example. So we have maybe 2 individuals, right? They have the exact same tanks, the exact same life support system, the exact same life inside the tanks, right? Only one lives in Pennsylvania, one lives in Florida, right? Those systems there, right, when you look at it, they are going to be, again, different as we know, but why would they even be different? Well, a couple things. Number one, we already talked about that amount of daylight that you're getting, so that means the amount of energy that you're going to be able to harvest is different, but then you have different climates, right? Your climate in the house in Florida is different than the climate in the house in Pennsylvania, right? So you take an environment like that, and let's just say, you know, those individuals, one individual likes to keep his house at 75 degrees temperature, the other one keeps it at 70 degrees temperature. Well, again, it's going to take a lot more electricity to heat up that 70 degree temperature house, right, your 78 degrees in your reef tank, and vice versa, right? So again, if you have somebody, if you're 75 degrees, then it's going to take less energy because it's 5 degrees already closer there. So either way, you get the idea. Every individual's, I'll say, tanks and setups, most of the time are going to be different. There are exceptions, we know that. However, just keep that in mind. Right? Which that will bring us to the third principle. And when I'm saying these principles, now we're starting to get into, okay, there's a little homework that we're going to have to do for the next episode, right? One homework assignment is, what is that design? What are we trying to use this energy for? We're trying to use it as a backup? Are we trying to use it to reduce my electric costs, right? What is that goal, right? So that's the first thing that, you know, those, well, I'll say two principles kind of lead to, and what we're going to need to move on to the next step, right? And what is that next step? It's ultimately going to be, how do you measure these things, right? And that's where something like this comes in play, right? We're going to use a meter, which I'm going to show you how to use in a little bit, but we're going to use a meter to figure out basically how much energy we need, right, to be able to produce or to store, etc., for that backup plan or for the goal, right, of what you're trying to achieve. Now, when you look at it again, and it goes back to why everything is different, in some cases, if you're going to use it as a backup plan, let's just say, again, you only want a 24-hour window for circulating and for heating. What you're going to do is you're going to take this meter, and for a 24-hour window, you're going to measure your circulating, right? And for another 24-hour window, you're going to measure your heating. And it's going to basically give us the amount of watts that were used in that 24-hour period. And that will start to put a line in the sand of what our needs are going to be. Right? Now, again, meters how we're going to do it, and ultimately everything comes down to a watt, right? However, I'm laughing because when you buy these things, they don't say just watts. They have it kilowatts, right? Or kilowatt hours. And that's kind of the fourth thing we need to understand. Basically is, what is a kilowatt hour? And it's relatively simple, right? Kilo, K-I-L-O, means 1,000, so 1,000 watts. So let's take an example again. Let's say we have a heater, a 100-watt heater, right? What that means is, if that heater is running for 1 hour, it will generate 100 watts. Now, if that heater was running consistently for 10 hours, it would generate 1,000 watts, or 1 kilowatt hour. And ultimately, when you're looking at these solar generators to solar panels to a lot of the, we'll say, the components that are going to fall into your backup plan, they're going to be measured in kilowatt hours. So what we need to do is figure out ultimately how many kilowatt hours we need to meet your plan. And that's where, again, we're going to take a look at the meter and see how we can use it to figure out how many watts we need. So with these kilowatt meters, they're really, really simple actually. When you look at them, going across, you'll see basically volts, amps, watts, right? Then you'll see the hertz, and then you also see something kWh, kilowatt hour, right? So all we have to do is take whatever you're going to do, and for my example, I am going to use a heater, right? It is a 300 watt heater, right? So I take this 300 watt heater, for example, right? And I take it and I plug it into the kilowatt, which by the way, I use the kilowatt just because I like the name instead of, K-I-L-O, it's K-I-L-L-A, right? So, that spin on words I thought was always creative, so that's why I've always liked them. And again, these things are cheap, 10, 20 bucks, that kind of thing. So either way, you notice when we plug it in here, right, basically when we press the watt button, it's going to tell us how many watts are being used. And in this case here, you can see we're close to that 300 watts that the actual heater is rated for. But then if you look over to the right, and if we press this kilowatt hour, it's going to tell us, hey, this is a running total of how many watts that we used during this whole process, right? So again, that's why what we want to do is we want to measure 24 hours, how many watts are we using? Because that will ultimately give us some parameters or some help with the parameters and the sizings of, what size generator do we want to use. And when I say generator, again, I'm saying solar generator. Even though, as we get into this, I think you'll find out that in the United States, there's not a whole lot of places where you can go 365 days a year just on solar, right? You need to supplement it. In that, I'll say, vein, what some people are doing is they're actually using a combination, right? They are getting a solar generator, and then they're also getting something called an ICE generator, which is internal combustion engine, right? And what they'll do is they'll say, listen, I'm going to use this solar generator for whatever design they come up with. Then what they do is they say, I'm also going to have one of these ICE generators. That way I can charge my solar generator up just in case the sun's not out, right? Because again, in the winter times or whatever, it depends on where you're at in use cases, there's just not the ability to harvest that energy from the sun. So they're doing it that way. And the reason why I even bring that up is because just to remember and to try to keep that in mind and to try to keep perspective on what your design goals are going to be, right? Because again, you can always design for we'll say 100% availability all the time. However, most of the times to get that, you won't be able to afford it, right? Whether you don't have the land, the luxury, the cash, whatever, fill in the blanks, right? So with that being said, that should wrap this first episode up of designing a solar system for your reef tank. And again, the homework assignment is to figure out A, what your design goal is, right? What tragedy, or not even a tragedy, but what are you trying to achieve with this energy that you're going to be harvesting? And then number two, from there, how much of that energy are you using, right? Is it 1 kilowatt hour? Is it 10 kilowatt hours a day? Is it more, right? We'll know by you measuring it. And again, you've heard me say a million times, well, maybe not a million, but probably at least thousands, give my sponsors a chance to earn that business. They're good, honest guys that, again, deserve that chance. That's Tunzi, Bulk Reef Supply, Premium Aquatics, and Ecosystems. Right? Good, honest guys that deserve your business. I'm Russ Kitko, and thanks for watching this episode of American Reef.